Our guest speaker today is University of Illinois landscape architect Brent Lewis, who will speak to us today about diversity on campus and the campus landscape master plan. Brent, I think you've got your slides up, so I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. Thanks, Julia. So I'm Brent Lewis. I'm the University Landscape Architect here at Capital Programs and Facilities and Services. I am a horticulturist, I'm a certified arborist, and then I'm a landscape architect. So I'm definitely steeped in plants. So this is definitely right up my alley. When they asked me to talk about the Campus Landscape Master Plan, I thought, hey, this is great. I would love to get this plan and this knowledge out to more people. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this is really, this stems out of a diversity inclusion effort. And so maybe I bait and switch you just a little bit and really talk more about diversity in our landscapes and then how that relates to the Campus Landscape Master Plan. So I think I'm going to talk about diversity first, and then towards the end, our Campus Landscape Master Plan. And I am going to call out that my wife is on the phone, Gail Lewis, who turns 50 tomorrow. So for those of you who know her, anyway, happy birthday to her. I'm just going to call her out on that, which is a great time. Okay, so we've got Campus Landscape Master Plan and plant diversity. Here we go. So plant diversity, the Prairie State. So that's what we call ourselves at Illinois, the Prairie State. 60% used to be prairie. That's like 21 million acres. That is a huge amount of the state. Are we still the Prairie State? I would say no. We're really a corn and soybean state at this point. It's less than 0.01%, which is just nothing. That's 210,000 acres. So our prairie and our diversity of plant materials has vastly shrunk from where it was before we got here. When we talk about that land acknowledgement statement, at that point, we had 60%. We've really drastically changed the landscapes of this state and honestly, most of the US. So as far as plant diversity goes, things have really changed. So we have to decide what that means to us and what we're going to do about it. When all that prairie went away, where did it go to? It went to stream corridors, it went to woodland corridors, it's along edges. You still have some in some parks and some forest preserves. Those are really a respite for plant diversity. But in general, a lot of this plant diversity has really gone into the shadows, into the back alleys, I'd say, of the landscape. But we are getting better at this. We have recognized that sort of we need to make some changes on those. And so that's where efforts like our Campus Landscape Master Plan come in, where we decide what can we do different. So plant diversity, there's a bunch of different aspects of that. One of them is in relation to insect diversity, which is why I've got this cute bee on here with the little flower, which is a beautiful photo, by the way. So how many native species of plants are here in Illinois? Does anybody know? I'm not going to ask you to unmute and do that. Your native species of plants in Illinois are 2,300. So as far as we could tell, we had about 2,300, so 2,300 different plants native to Illinois that were here before. How many native pollinator insects do we have in Illinois? I have no idea. I tried to Google that, no idea. But I know there's about 350,000 different types of pollinator insects in the entire world. So that's an awful lot. But in Illinois, I'm not sure. But when you bring that down to native bees, because native bees are the ones doing most of the pollination for insect diversity, we've got 400 to 500 different native bees. I know we all think about the honeybees, which come from Europe, and we think about bumblebees, maybe carpenter bees, but really it's 400 to 500 different types that we have here. It's an awful lot. And then, why do we care? That's a real big question, because facts are interesting to know, but why do we care? And essentially because we care because all those insects had to go somewhere, right? Some died, some adapted, lots of them are struggling. And when we lose those insects, we lose our diversity of life. And when we lose our plants and pollinators, we lose our food, because really most of our food is still insect pollinated. It's 81%, I believe. It's a huge amount. So a lot of our food is directly associated with insects. No insects, no food, which sounds terrible. We all like food, right? I think it's actually 90%. Bees are responsible for 90% of the world's pollination. So we also lose our pretty landscapes. The insects that are doing the pollination then create all the fruits that come after that, and the changes in the colors of the flowers. And so there's a lot of the aesthetics that we're seeing in life that really would go away. And if we don't have our insects to pollinate the flowers, then we don't have the fruit from the flowers that create the seeds that then create the flowers for the next year, right? So our insects get less, or I'm sorry, our landscapes get less and less diverse as we go along. And then pretty soon you're down to just a handful of plants that are just everywhere, which in some ways is what suburbia is like. That's kind of the direction everyone has gone, is that same 10 to 20 plants that do well everywhere are what everyone plants, because you never do well and it's available. But really that doesn't benefit our environment, doesn't benefit ecology, it doesn't benefit our food systems, and it doesn't benefit our ecological systems. When we lose our insects and when we lose our diversity of plants, we're also losing some of the benefits later down the line, like our animals that depend on them. And then I also wanted to say, yeah, our animals that depend on them, like our monarch butterflies and our hummingbirds and our migratory birds. There's a lot of other animals and insects and birds that really depend on this, that aren't even native to Illinois, but just fly through it. So really, we're supporting not just an Illinois ecosystem or a U of I ecosystem, but really it's a global ecosystem. So when we're thinking about our plants, that's what we really have to think about. It's a larger system than just us. We're just a little piece in the cogs, but we're a piece that's important. And then I also want to say about insect diversity and plant diversity, a lot of them co-evolved. So you've got insects that grew together and co-evolved with plants. So you've got plants that have, they might emit a certain pheromone that attracts a certain insect. There are insects out there that are generalist and they don't really care. Whatever has pollen or nectar, they're going to go to. But then you have other plants and insects that are very specific to each other. And the case in point here is obviously the monarch. I mean, that's a great one. Everyone knows that one. Monarch butterflies like milkweed. They will eat the nectar of other types of plants, but when it comes to laying their eggs, it has to be butterfly weed, and that's it. No butterfly weed, no monarchs. And that's a population that's really struggled in the last decade, and the numbers have been declining again and again. And so getting more of those plants out there is really helpful to support those. And then like I was saying earlier, if we don't have some of these insects, like when the monarchs go away or some of their plants go away, it's this knock-on domino effect. If they're gone, then the insects and the animals that eat them are gone, and then the things that go up the chain are gone. So it's a domino effect that we really want to avoid. And at this point, we're pretty far into it, so we're trying to unroll and unravel some of that and turn back the clock. Okay, so I was talking about plants, plant diversity and insect diversity. So this was really interesting. This was Charles Robertson back in 1884 to 1916, so kind of a long time ago. He spent 32 years looking at these three different plants, this polemonium, the helianthus, and ipomea. So basically, what I've got here is a Jacob's ladder, it's the polemonium, helianthus is a sawtooth sunflower, and ipomea is kind of like a morning glory wild potato vine. So we looked at these three plants, and then he was collecting the type of insects that were on there. And what he noticed is that between these three plants, there were 49 different species that were bee species, long-tongued, not even short-tongued, but long-tongued bee species that were using these plants for a food source. And out of those 49, only these 5 would overlap over those 3 plants. Before this, we just really didn't know who was using what. We just thought, oh, plants are plants, insects use all of them. It doesn't matter what we plant. But, studies like this were really showing that you've only got 5 out of these 49 that overlapped on 3 plants. And then in the yellow here, you've only got 4 that overlap on some of these plants, on 2 plants. And then you've got 40 of the 49 that only went to 1. Now, again, these bees, it's 40 different species, but they're all long-tongued bees. You would think they would be pretty similar. but even then they're not. So we really have to look at the diversity of our plant material to make sure we're using plants that lots of species can use, as well as accounting for plants that only some species can use. And that's an awful lot to think about. And honestly, it's a little over the top when we're coming up with the landscape designs, but it's something we still need to think about as much as possible, that we are accounting for all the different insects. And I think I don't think people realize that so much. It's really an integral and interesting, complex society that plants and insects have really grown to. Okay, so let's go. Oops, I went backwards there. Sorry about that. Okay, so then this one, this is Dahlia purpurea. This is one that I really like. I consider this one a bee buffet. When we talk about plants that lots of insects are using, this one, in that same study, he had found 37 different types of long-tongued bees, 18 short-tongued bees, 15 Hymenoptera, that's like some of your wasp and things, different types of wasps, 12 Diptera, that's the fly family, 6 of the Lepidopteras, which is your butterflies, 4 of the Coleopteras, which are like the hard shell bugs, and 2 of the Hemipteras, which are the true bugs, like a soft shell bug. So you have a ton of different insects, all feeding on the nectar and pollen of this one plant. So if we include a bunch of things like this, we're really helping our environment, because we are helping those generalists that are out there. But then again, we still have to look at what are we not getting, and how can we still broaden the palette so we've got enough for everything. But these are the type of plants that I really like to use. The unfortunate thing about this purple prairie clover is really a pretty plant, and it's kind of architectural in the way it looks. It doesn't like really nice, moist, super fertile soil. It likes soil that's maybe a little drier, not as great. It's a little more difficult soil. So sometimes I have a hard time with this one on campus, but I sure try. I'm trying to hit as much as we can. So plant diversity in relation to insects, what can we do about this? So installing plants that flower at different times of year, when the insects are just coming out of hibernation, they've got nothing to eat, right? So when you're looking at what you're going to plant in your yard, or what you're going to plant in a business, or here on U of I, where we've got thousands and thousands of acres, we really need to look at what am I providing in that early spring so they can have something. So in this case, I've thrown in bluebells. Bluebells are blooming right now. The Virginia bluebells, that's a really pretty flower that you'll find out in the woodlands. And then going a little bit further than that, you've got your crab apples, like I show here. And then into the spring and the summer, I've got echinacea, coneflowers. And then later into the fall, you've got your asters. And then I threw in this other image here of using, making sure that we think about what are the other animals eating during the wintertime. We still have some birds that stick around. We've got lots of squirrels and whatnot, and I know we all love our squirrels here. So what can we do with all of them? We can make sure that we're planting things that have acorns and, fruits, and that have different colors and forms and textures, and, just a whole variety of stuff on the campus and in your own houses. So you're really looking at the full schedule of how do we make our landscapes aesthetically pleasing and super beautiful, but also super functional, because they don't have to be mutually exclusive. They really can work the same thing. Using plants with different types of flowers and seeds is really important. There are, even within the same flower, like this one right here, these are called disc flowers up on the top, and then on the sides, these petals are actually ray flowers. So there's 2 different types of insects with different types of appendages that are going to be able to access that nectar and pollen in there. So those are 2 completely different things, but looking at making sure you've got different plant types for different types of insects. And then I want to talk about cultivars and non-natives can be still wildly beneficial. There is a stereotype that all cultivars are sterile, that none of the native insects care or even know what to do with any of the cultivars or non-natives. That's really not true. The research doesn't bear that out. And part of the research is the fact there is no research. It's very little that people have looked at non-natives and native insects. So I know that we were doing some of that here on campus a couple of years ago, and people are trying to look at that a little bit more, but it obviously doesn't make any sense, because we've got non-natives all over campus and they're full of pollinators. You know, you go out there on a sunny day and they are just full of insects. So that's false. There are some sterile cultivars that aren't beneficial, but for the most part, you know, they're still going to be beneficial. So you know, still use them. Just be judicious about what you're using and making sure you're not planting something that's invasive. We have a lot of invasives on campus. It's one of the things that I'm trying to get rid of. You know, the pear trees are super invasive. Honeysuckle is terribly invasive. Even our burning bush, which we all love because the fall color of a burning bush, that bright red, is just amazing and vibrant. It gets out into the forest and just spreads. So it's really not a great plant. And at some point, you know, we need to pull those out and go to something else. But that's what you need to be careful about with invasives and cultivars and non-natives, just making sure they're not invasive. Here we go. Okay, so let's pivot to tree diversity. The established norm is 10, 20, 30. So when you're looking at the urban forest, the urban canopy, and how many trees we have, and you break those down into what type of species, which are individual plants, that's the 10. Species would be like a red oak, you know, and then what type of genus, which would be the oak family, where that'd be 20%, so no more than 20% of the oak family, and then of the oaks. And then 30% would be the type of family, which in this case, an oak is Fagaceae, which is beech, chestnut, and oak. And that's all in that same family there. So no more than 30% of that. So this established norm, I haven't actually looked into who came up with this in the first place. I think it was just a number that was plucked out of the sky, and they thought, this sounds good, 10, 20, 30, it's easy to remember. I think we'll just throw it out there and we'll just use it. And I don't think a lot of thought went into it. So based on the research, you know, who meets that quota? So we use Davy Tree Keeper to inventory all of our trees, which is down at the moment. Don't go looking for it. It's in procurement. We're going to get that fixed. But that Davy Tree Keeper is really great because they've got inventories of cities and towns and universities and arboretums all over the US. And they went and mined all their data and they said, okay, this 10, 20, 30 sounds great. Who's meeting it? And it turns out nobody, you know, basically nobody. The only ones who ever meet it are universities and arboretum, because it's part of our mission to be more diverse. But all the cities and municipalities, you know, townships, none of them meet that. You know, their numbers are off the charts. And really, you know, what are the 10 trees that do well? I'm just going to plant those 10. Whereas we say how much diversity we can pack into one small area. So it's kind of a problem. Is the quota reasonable? I think that this 10, 20, 30 is not a good quota. So we've looked at ours and we've looked at you know, where we are with this. We're much better than 10, 20, 30, which I can show you here. Okay, so diversity of species. Diversity of species, so 10% is the goal. We're at 8.1. So just in case you didn't know this, the most common tree on campus is a white pine. And I remember I told that to Ryan Welch, who's our superintendent of grounds, and he said, no way, there's no way that's our most common tree. I mean, surely that's a mistake. It is our most common tree. You wouldn't think it. They are all over the place, but they're kind of background, right? You know, they don't really give fall color. They don't have spring flowers. There's never a time where they really pop out and shine, so you don't really see them, but they're there all the time. Number 2 for us is crab apples, and then number 3 would be our red oaks, which is in here, and then you've got maples after that, like sugar maple. So that's what we got. So we're at 8.1, so we're winning. We're better than 10. I would like that 8 to be more like a 6, maybe even a 5. So that's what I'm working towards. But we're getting there. And you do that by looking at all these areas where we barely have any trees, and I'm not planting any white, I'm not planting any of these pines. You know, the white pines, I'm not planting any. If I'm going to plant something, I'm going to pick from something over here that we don't have many of. And that's how we you know, change this a little bit. The next one is genus. So remember, that's like the oak family. That's all the oaks that we have. There are 600 different oaks in the world, and we have about 20 that are native to Illinois. It's not a huge number, but it's about 20. But when you come to genus, 14%. So the goal is 20 and we're at 14. I feel pretty good about that. We are pretty oak heavy in some areas and we are losing some of them. So as those come out, we're not going back with oaks. We're trying to, change some of those corridors, like here at Florida and Kirby. It's an awful lot of oaks down this road and we're losing those. So we're not going back with the same trees. But oak is definitely our number 1 tree. And then we've got maples for our number 2 tree. And then pine, even though white pines are the most common tree on campus, as far as the genus of different kinds of pines, we actually slot down to number 3. And then number 4 is, again, the crab apples, because we have an awful lot of them. And then the tree diversity for family, that's your 30% is the goal. So UIUC is at 19.6. So again, the pine family goes back up to the top. The pine family is all the pines, cedars, spruce, larch, hemlock. It's the majority of all those evergreens that you see out there. So it is an awful lot. The evergreens are important to us. But yeah, 19.6, that's higher than I'd like to be. I'm still a full 10% less, than the goals are out there. So I feel pretty good about that. We're in a good zone. I'm shooting for more like 5, 10, 15 if I can, over my 20 some years here at some point. I hope to be more in that range. And I think that would be helpful. All right, so tree diversity, I think this is important. Why do we care? And I always come back to why do we care? So a little history of campus. You have to go back to the American elm. It's Ulmus americana, beautiful tree. This graced much of Main Street America, as they call it. In some places, you still have a lot of these out here. They are 60 to 80 feet tall, 40 to 70 feet wide. I mean, this is an amazing picture here. You can tell this one, if you had this towards the side of your yard, you're going to be shading your entire yard and your neighbor and possibly the neighbor on the other side, plus the street. I mean, the trees were huge. Plus, you can still drive your semi trucks under it, if you had to go down a road. So they were just the most beautiful trees, definitely. So this is a little bit blurry, but it's a really nice photo that I found of a park. So when you've got a whole bunch of these in fall, this is just a stellar sort of view. And this is what we had on campus. So if we go back to 1929, Ferruccio Vitale, he was our original landscape architect that we hired to come in from the outside, come in and do a landscape plan and really decide what we're going to do on campus. So he's the one who created all of our historic landscape for campus. And you can read this stuff in the BOT, Board of Trustees minutes, but I think it's interesting. He said malls and avenues should be planted with long-lived trees sufficiently diversified to relieve monotony and ensure protection in case of an attack of disease upon a species. So he is saying right here in 1929, long-lived native trees, but don't over-rely on one tree in case you have some sort of disease that comes about. I mean, he really nailed that in 1929. Let's make sure that we get this right. And then it went wrong because he says in Illinois, you have a rich number of trees, and so we should use all of them. And then he throws in this but. So this but is terrible. It would be tempting to do that, but you've already planted all these beautiful elm trees, and really they're amazing. And so you should just plant more of them. And that's essentially what he says here. So let's plant more American elms. So he said, don't do something that's going to cause a problem. And then about 3 paragraphs later, he says, I'm going to do something that may cause a problem, but it's so beautiful, I just can't look away. We're just going to do it. So that was 1929. So this is a picture of 1935. We get campus here. I love this. This is Fullinger. This is your main quad. Over here on this side, this is like South Quad. This is the Morrill Plots. This is the Stock Pavilion down here. Freer Hall all by its lonely self. That's what it looked like. So all of these trees through here, these are all American elms. The majority of all of this. And this walkway coming through, this walkway is amazing. What an amazing place to be walking. We're a pedestrian society here. So it's the one thing that I'm always prioritizing is shade for pedestrians. It's why people want to go here. If you don't have big old trees, you could just go online, get a degree online, you know, or go to a strip mall college. The big old trees imply importance, prominence, heritage. You know, it says that, hey, we've been here a long time and we're important enough that we have these massive trees because we've been here. You know, we are established and mature and have a name. And so that's what people are looking for. They may not be able to tell you with their words, but it is an implied feeling of permanence and importance. So the tree canopy is super important here. This, make sure I'm not missing this. So this is around that same time. This is Fullinger right here. Gregory Hall is on this side, and you're looking down that amazing cathedral. And honest, you know, it's too bad that this is in winter, but you're looking at that amazing cathedral of all those American elms. I mean, the way they have this vase shape that the branches are really ascending, and it creates a cathedral sort of look. And this is the main quad here. Really amazing. You know, this is where you want to be. Even on a winter day, this is an experience. So what happened was, let's see, 1944. In 1944, we had elm yellows come about. Elm yellows was a bacterial disease. It spread very slowly, but it was starting to kill our trees. So we had elm yellows come in 44, and then in 51, Dutch elm disease came in, and Dutch elm disease was just an absolute killer. It was a death sentence for most of our trees. So we had, and that's a fungal. It's a fungal pathogen that comes in with elm bark beetle. So what you're seeing here is the bark beetles get under the bark, and then they just eat all of the soft tissue basically of the tree, and it kills it, because this is where your food and water is going up and down the tree. So they just kill it. Entire parts of the tree, you know, like this one down here, just killed off. So we had 2,300 American elms on campus. You know, and this is the one, even before 29, we'd already been planting them and creating these beautiful LAs. And then we just added more, right? We're just throwing more fuel on the fire. So 2,300 American elms on campus, and then thousands more in the surrounding Champaign-Urbana. So there's no, you can spray for it. You know, you can do a fungicide that sprays for it and an insecticide, and that helps. But we did our best to control it and to save these trees as long as we could. And we made it to late 50s and even early 60s for some of our trees. And at that point, you know, the grounds department just threw up their hands and said, yeah, we can't compete. You know, Champaign-Urbana is not doing anything about it. And there's so many trees in the surrounding area that if they're not going to control all of them, we just can't keep spraying all the time. And so they let them go, and they let them die. So this is one of the last ones to be cut down. This would be early 60s, but you can see that's a massive tree, you know, and this is due to planting all the same trees on campus. So after they cut them all down, they replaced a bunch with things like honey locust. This is 1980. If you remember, you know, this is Union here, this is Fullinger, again, the stock pavilion. This row through here that used to go through the undergrad library, you know, this row was amazing. By 1980, it looks okay. That's 1980. You know, I mean, that's another 20 years after they took down some of the last ones. And I would say that we still never really recovered in the same way, just because that type of tree was so super unique. But it's taken a long time for us to recover from that. Okay, so the question is, did we learn a lesson? It's a good one. What happened in 2002 was emerald ash borer. I'm sure you guys have heard about that. You know, in 2002, emerald ash borer was found. It's a small insect. I can go to this. It's a small insect. It's a pretty insect, actually, that does the same thing, gets under the bark. It eats all of the soft tissue through there. And it killed a lot of trees. They removed 40 million trees in Detroit. In Illinois, we had it by 2006. And by 2015, it had killed 200 million trees. It's a massive, massive amount of trees. We had subdivisions where entire subdivisions were just green ash. Everything was green ash. And the emerald ash borer was just going from tree to tree to tree, just killing them off. So it was the same sort of thing as the Dutch elm disease. Let's see. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say about that. No. So this was a horrible thing. Here we go. Did we learn a lesson? You know, we had about 550 trees out of maybe 18,500 trees on campus. And if you go to our tree keeper, we had about 18,500 trees. About 550 were ash trees, and that's it. That's like 3%. So, you know, my question is always, did you even notice? I mean, we were killing millions upon millions upon millions of trees were having to be died and having to be removed, or were just dying in place all over the US. And here on campus, I don't think anyone even noticed. You know, kids would go back to their homes and their subdivisions, and they would be just completely deforested. All the trees were gone. And here on campus, nobody noticed. You know, we have about 3 or 4 left on campus, maybe 5 or 6, in a couple odd spots. You know, they'll probably come down this year or next year. You know, we don't have very many left, but for the most part, we learned our lesson. You know, in places like the main quad, in places of importance, you know, we're not taking down all the trees. And if something dies from a disease, we'll just replace it, and it's fine. Other plant diversity, just in case you're curious, we're not tracking shrub diversity or perennial diversity. The Reddick Rain Garden, if you know about that installation, right? There's about 60 different plants on a 1/4 acre, which is super high diversity, which is amazing. And then you've got the Solar Farm 2.0. We've got 9 grass species and 25 different perennials, which we really were looking at for multi-use for lots of different insects on a 54-acre site. So I have 54 acres of prairie, which is just massive. But it's in one spot. So I'm going to have a high population of pollinators there, but I need to then continue to do more pollinator-friendly plants going up and down campus to make sure that we have sort of a corridor for insects and things to move through. Tree diversity, planning for the future. You know, climate is changing, and CU is getting hotter, and the hardiness zones, excuse the E, the hardiness zones are moving. We're roughly 40 miles from the next hardiness zone. We're like a hardiness zone of 5 right now. It's 5B. We're right by 6. 6 is coming. We're getting hotter. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're beginning to look at the trees that grow further south. You know, can we take a look at some of those trees and then pull them up? This is something we're doing all over the place. It's not just us. And I do get some pushback sometimes about wanting to plant trees that are not native to this county or even this part of Illinois, but plants don't care, right? Plants are going to grow where they feel like they can grow. And so if you've got an area that is right for them, they're going to move into it. And so it's not up to me to decide necessarily what grows where. They're going to come here regardless. So if that's going to happen and I'm going to lose plants that it's going to be too hot for us, then I need to look at something that's going to be that's going to do better. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. Just as an aside, Oregon and Washington, you know, they're looking at bringing in the sequoias from California. You know, the giant sequoias living for thousands of years. You know, they're burning up in the wildfires. We're losing 10 to 20% of our sequoias every single year because of wildfires, which is horrific. I mean, we don't have that many in the first place. And to last 3,000 years, 3,000 years, and then die in a wildfire because you're just burned every single time. They just can't do it. So there are people who are taking saplings from the sequoias and they're moving them up the country. They're going to Northern California, they're going to Oregon, they're going to Washington, and they're just saying, if things are getting hotter here, let's replant them further up and not just let them die. So, you know, there is a precedent for this all over campus. And as a side note to a side note, I don't know if you know this, the world's tallest trees are in America, in California, and some of the world's oldest trees, including the oldest tree, are also in America, in California. I didn't really realize that until this last year, and I think that's pretty amazing. Go to California before we burn these things down and go see things that you cannot see in the rest of the world. oldest and tallest. That's pretty impressive. And they're not the same trees, but it is really super impressive. Here's that hardiness zone map I was talking about. This basically talks about, the cold temperatures that the plants can handle versus the hot temperatures and things. And I thought this was pretty good. Here's this little star. This is where we're at. So this blue area is zone 5, and we're on the bottom part of zone 5. So they call that a 5B. 5A would be up here, but we're real close. And then if I go to this graphic shows what's changed. So over the last couple of decades, we've had a big change here. And the thing that I want to point out on this is where all this change is happening is this central part of the US. I wonder if I can't pause that apparently. But over here on the west side, we're not getting a lot of change. This is all pretty much the same. And over here on the east side, it's really similar. But this central section of the US, the Midwest, really is changing. And we are just right there by zone 6. It's coming quick. So we really need to look at that. Low hanging fruit, we're moving low mow zones to prairie and woodland. That's something we're doing. We're increasing the biodiversity of the low mows and the planting beds we already have. And we're looking to maintain a greater percentage of natives in new project landscape designs. That's definitely something I'm looking at is what do I already have in this area? What do I have on campus? How can I get something that we don't have or more of the things that we barely have? Okay, so that was a long introduction, and then I'm just going to get to the campus landscape master plan really quick because there's just really two things I want to show that really relate to this. This is our campus landscape master plan. You can go and read this. Please do. It is a long document, but just pick out the parts that are interesting. We want to reflect the indigenous Midwest across the campus landscapes. So we want to use plants that were indigenous here. We want to highlight sustainability as a core value of our landscapes, and we want to become a world leader in rainwater management. Those are all super important. This is one of the two projects I wanted to talk about just briefly. The main quad, the main quad, Ferruccio Vitale, he's the one who started this, right? So he had some great design ideas, and then the way that he put that into the project, into the process, he made some mistakes. So we fixed the mistakes. But let's go back at this point and let's redo some of these areas. Let's make sure this hedge here is continuous throughout all of it, and that we have his historic landscape design, which made sense. It's buildings on the outer edge, and then ornamental trees, and then hedges, and then our shade trees, and then the open serene space down the middle. It's only 4 plants. That's all it is. It's 4 plants, but the scale is just right. He really nailed that. But within that, let's go back and add some diversity. This was the type of landscape design that made sense in the 20s and the 50s and the 60s and the 80s. But now that we're in the 2020s, we look at landscapes differently. And now I want to know, well, how does this benefit our pollinators? How are we supporting the ecosystems in the surrounding CU area? And the answer is, we're really not. So how can we inject something in here to make this better? So the plans here are to go back, starting behind the hedge, in these areas behind the hedge, which we're not looking at in the first place. And instead of just doing mulch under those ornamental trees, let's come back with a ground cover that's all native plants and that is useful for the pollinators. And if I can get native and indigenous landscape designers, if I can hire some of them to come help me learn how to make that soil better and have these plants survive here and how to maintain them, then I'm all for it. So I'm really looking to bring in our indigenous folks and our pollinator plants and bring that back into the diversity of the quad. And now this space is a much more lively space. And now the space supports more of the university. I'm all about multifunctional landscapes. And if our landscapes can do more without taking away from anything, I'm all for it. If we can support the pollinators, the monarchs, the hummingbirds, whatnot, and we're not taking away usable space, that's a total win. So these are the things that I'm really interested in. So that's one of them. And I see it's 12:44, so I'll go to the next. Here's a view of this. Again, we keep the turf down the middle. We do change it out to a different turf that does a little bit better in the heat and with the traffic of the people. But but we keep this the same. We use permeable pavers all over the place, so we infiltrate that water. And then especially behind the hedge, we come back with a diversity of planting. Now, in 20, 30 years, if this works and our groundskeepers are really good at keeping up with it, everyone's happy with it, no one will ever be happy with it like entirely, but there will always be some people who aren't. But for the most part, this is what our students are asking for. So when we get through that initial difficulty of changing something, this change is difficult. When we get through that, I think people will like this. And if this is working well, then we step outside the hedge, and then we get to these areas behind the made sidewalks, these little triangle zones. Again, this is unused space. Nobody hangs out in these triangles. They hang out either on the side or definitely in the middle. But back here, this is not where you're hanging out. So then we flip those spaces to more pollinator friendly as well. So that's our plan here. We use our rainwater, we keep it in the soils, and then we increase our pollinators. And then here's another view of this. We did used to have a bunch of trees randomly throughout here. I did get a lot of questions about that. I've been wanting to take those trees down forever. They were sweet gums. They were unhealthy. They were dying a little bit every year. They were yellow because they didn't have the right soil type. They dropped those big seed pods. I'm super happy to take those out. And honestly, they ruined the symmetry of the space. So we've done better to finally get rid of those. And then the other one is military access. This is another spot that I really like. We've got Siebel Center for Design here, and then we have a generally open area. Now, right here in front of Education Building, this is a parking lot. We've been talking about getting rid of that parking lot and that road for a long time. Eventually it will happen. It's been on the books for quite a while, but this is a great place to make a different access. Our north-south access has this historic campus landscape, and it's open and it's simple and it's serene, and we decompress. That's what our students need. You need to go out there. We need to just sit in the sun and decompress and not think about all the stuff we have to do. But then in this east-west corridor, this access is an opportunity to do something different. It's an opportunity to showcase the Illinois landscapes, the woodlands, the savannas, the prairie zones, the wetland zones. It's an opportunity for us to use our landscapes to actually teach people about sustainability and about ecology. So that's what we're doing through here. And it's another really fantastic space that we could open up for our Indigenous folks to put in signage, to put in, some history. It's something that's important to them to be able to talk about their history. A lot of their history is oral. And so getting things on signs and then being able to teach that to everyone would really be an amazing feat for us. And I know, having talked to our tribal liaisons, it's something that they're interested in. It's something that they would really love, a place to get away and be engrossed in the land, because the land is what is most important to them. And the land is really what is supporting all of us. So if we can dedicate this space to a multifunctional, supportive place to, again, go out and explore and learn and decompress and ground yourself to nature, that's a win. So this is another super important area for me. And I think I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop after this one. So this is the perspective view of that. You see, we'd still have trees on the side. We would still flank it like it is a normal space for our quad spaces, but then we would fill it with other things. And again, it would be a giant outdoor laboratory, basically. Really would be helpful, especially for ACEs, especially for sustainability, especially for landscape architects. It would be a pretty amazing space. There you go. And I think I'm gonna stop it there and see if anyone has any questions.
Brent, we did have one from the chat. Are all of those bee species still around as pollinators in Illinois and on campus?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It is something that I struggle with. I'm not the entomology expert. We do have an awful lot of bees that still live on campus. A lot of the bees that we have are solitary bees. So they might live in holes in the ground or behind the bark in a tree, or somewhere near a building or in the mulch. So they're all over the place. They just don't live in a big hive. Like the honeybees live in hives, and those are the ones that we sort of, we're all familiar with. All these others, a singular bee here and there, you're not even going to notice it, but they're all different. So we do have a lot of them. I'm not sure how many different species we have, but it is the trick of wanting to provide something for everything, but still needing to be kind of a generalist, because I'm not sure exactly which insects I'm shooting for, right? So that hopefully that's a good answer for you. The answer is I don't know, but I'm doing the best we can.
Cheryl also had a question. What are the changes in maintenance that will take place over the years? Going from, oops, sorry, lost my place here. Going from mostly non-native grasses to indigenous plantings and more prairie plantings, how does that affect the process?
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. I am pushing for more and more of these native installations. At some point, I realized if I don't push for it and I don't approve it and I don't get it in here, we will never ramp up to being able to maintain them. So our maintenance guys right now, they're not ecologists. They're, for the most part, other than maybe one, they're not horticulturists. They don't have any specialized training. And this really takes specialized training because the plants look a little bit different, and you don't know which ones are which. You don't know what to weed. And so, little by little, we do need to hire a different type of grounds worker. We can still use the people we have, but we really need to supplement them to have a little bit different knowledge to be able to maintain this. And when more of campus looks like this, it'll be easier for even those who aren't trained to start to understand, oh, this is a weed, this is something I keep, this is something I encourage. It is going to take a while, and we are going to have to staff up for it. And that is something that we're aware of. And we've made requests for all those.
Okay, one more question. On the changes planned for the area near Education and Architecture Building, will 6th Street be closed to through traffic in that plan?
Let's see, you want me to go back to that? 6th Street. So no, we did not talk about closing 6th Street. We did talk about it in the campus master plan. We did talk about making this like a permeable paver, and that would allow this to feel more like it's flowing from one side to the other, but we wouldn't close that street. We didn't really feel like that was necessary. So hopefully it looks like that in there. I see that it pinches off a little bit. I think we got rid of the parking is what we did. So you wouldn't have anything looking to stop your views as you look through there. It's mainly this is what we'd want to get rid of, the drive that's through here. And eventually this parking lot between TBH and Education, that'll be a building at some point as well. So this really creates a beautiful quad for them. Our open spaces are really important. People always look at the open spaces and want to put a building on it. And then that's a city. And we don't want to be a city. We want to be a campus. And campus needs open space. Pickup games, marching bands, decompression area, outdoor laboratories. Like we actually really need that open space. We can't be a city. So these are important places to protect.
What involvement will Native people have on the native planting areas proposed on the military axis?
Yeah, so when we get to that point of design, we have, tentatively, and I've had conversations with them at this point, we would have them hire a native landscape designer. It wouldn't have to be a licensed landscape architect necessarily, but there are lots and lots of native indigenous folks who know about the plants that grow here and did grow here and have that expertise. So we would absolutely have them on the team, if not even driving the team. I can't be sure who I'm going to get for that, but it definitely is going to be a part of it, and not a, hey, Native folks, would you like to just donate your time for this university project? We don't want to do that. We want to pay people for their time, and we want it to be meaningful. And we want it to be meaningful. That's a big part of it. We want it to be meaningful for them as much as it is for us. And they are busy, and they don't have a lot of time. When you're talking about the government of the tribes, but we can find lots of people who have knowledge who would be interested in working for us.
Okay, since the release of the campus landscape master plan, how many projects related to the concepts for the district designs are already being incorporated into capital planning or other efforts?
So what we're doing right now, there are some, there's some small ones here and there that we're already working on. We're working on permeable pavers here and there, and we're working on more native installations. We're doing monarch butterfly weed seeds in all of our LOMOs. We have stepped forward into beginning some of this, but also campuses ask us to put together a list of all the projects that we could come up with from this campus landscape master plan, not just the prototype projects, but all the projects we could come up with a cost, prioritize them by years. So I'm looking at a 1 to 5 prioritization, and then put a cost to those and then submit that to them for funding. So we are actively pinpointing what we think we should spend money on, prioritizing what we think is most valuable, putting a cost to it, and then sending that up the chain for administration, who has money to fund this, is what I'm told. I just don't know what that is. So we're going through this effort to sort of ferret that out. And meanwhile, when we have new capital projects that come in, I make sure that we're looking at rainwater. What are we doing with our water? Making sure we're doing green stormwater infrastructure, making sure that the plant material is sustainable and brings in more pollinator friendly things and more diversity. So, that is always ongoing. But some of these bigger projects, we're in a pretty big effort to put that forward to campus.
What kind of native plants would be for a ground cover? I know we have those low mow areas, and that almost seems like the long, tall grass. Is there anything lower that's like a ground cover?
Yeah, the ground covers, it depends on how much sun or how much shade you have. Ground covers that I like to use that are native are like the Asterium, the wild gingers. I really like a wild ginger. I think it makes a nice ground cover. There's also a wild strawberry. Uh, Sometimes you'll see it in your yards. It's really low, but you want to mix a couple ground covers together. Ground covers are really hard to do just one plant, so you want to mix in several different plants that are kind of similar, and then let them fight it out a little bit. That's what I would do. But those are two that I would use. If you want to send me an email, I could probably provide some others. One really good resource for things like this is Midwest Ground Covers. It's a nursery in the Chicago area in the western suburbs, and they do a really good job sorting out the types of native plants and their uses. So that would be a really good resource for that.
Okay, I think I've gotten all the questions from the chat. Does anyone want to ask anything of Brent? Otherwise, we're about at the end of our time, and I will let him get off.
Sounds great.
Anyone have anything last they'd like to say? We'd really like to thank you, Brent. This was really interesting. I've taken a look at the campus landscape master plan, and it's so detailed and so full of great ideas. It's really worth the read.
Uh, Thanks. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the time to talk to everyone about this. It's an important project for campus, and it's an important project for me. So I always appreciate the help and the support on it. Hopefully
I
you
asked
learned
a
something.
question outside of campus in our own yards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what should we be doing? What should we not do to contribute to diversity in plants and so on? And
So I would say take a look at your lawn. The mowed lawn is the number one thing about the suburbs and subdivisions. See if you can reduce your lawn. Most of us have more lawn than we actually need. Have an area that's usable, and then outside of that, change to a different type of ground cover, and maybe even going with a non-native. Maybe even you're just doing clovers. Clovers are actually fantastic for pollinators, and you can mow right over them, and they're still flower at a really low level. So that would be important. Looking at changing that over to something else, or going from grass to maybe a sedge. Pennsylvania sedge is a really good one that does well in the heat or the dry, but that's one we're using all over campus as a kind of grass substitute. I would reduce your insecticide use, just in case you are spraying for anything. The sprays are the #1 killer of all the pollinator and insects in America. We're using way too many chemicals. So try to really stay away from that stuff. And if you have a plant that's a problem plant and you've got insects that are just killing it off, just take it out. Don't be so married to one plant that you can't change it out and do something different. Be flexible. When you come in with plants are like people. You're going to like some, you're not going to like others. I mean, things are going to happen. And so sometimes you just have to get rid of those. Don't get rid of people. That's illegal. But plants, you should get rid of those and just try something else. Just experiment with it. Nature is a big experimental place, and it should be fun, not irritating.
I think I irritate our neighbors because we have that dandelions and clover and stuff like that in our yard. And I'm like, but the bees.
Right. Yeah. Well, especially with the dandelions, we used to have a lot of plants that we would call weeds, and we really eradicated the majority of them. And you're down to the toughest of the tough plants. So that dandelion, that's a real tough one. We'll never get rid of that one. But the clovers are great. Just start mixing in other things, other ephemerals, like the bluebells or Claytonia. Spring Beauty is what that's called. Mix in some other stuff, and it'll be a little prettier, and people won't notice the other stuff so much.
And I hope that the clover could kill off the creeping Charlie.
Yeah, creeping Charlie's up there with dandelions. I mean, those are really difficult things to get rid of.
Yeah.
The Arboretum has some information on that. That's about good ways to get rid of that. I've had to use some chemicals in my yard on that as well, and I wasn't super happy about that. That creeping Charlie's, it's horrible.
It smells good though.
It does smell good, yes.
It's fun to pull out. It's fun to pull out, but it's sad to see it come back again after you pulled it out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Their roots are deep.
Thank you, Brent.
Yep. You're welcome.
All right. I think we'll wrap everything else up if no one else has any questions. Brent, we really appreciate your speaking with us today. This was so informative.
Good. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.